Welcome to Stepping Stones. Today is March 1st, 2015. This will be Esther chapter 5. Esther visits the king. So we're continuing our story. I've lifted some photographs here from a couple different movies that are out there related to this, and I'll give credit to one here in just a little bit. I think this photograph comes from that same one that I mentioned in just a little bit. So this is one interpretation of what Esther might have looked like. And I just throw in items there so that if you were to go through and Google what would you find, and this kind of gives you some idea of how some people have imagined some of these older stories might have looked like. So it's interesting dropping into the text. This is the absolute turning point for the story. This is the climax without question. And yet, to be honest, when you go through and read it, it's there, but the punch isn't quite as strong as for those of us who are kind of visual folks maybe would like. So let me go through and read through some of the pieces that are here. And then let me go back to some imagery to see if it'll help convey some of the least way I would understand the story. So on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. So I think you all probably have seen the previous videos and you're tracking along with the story, but the important part is that the penalty for what she has just done is death. She has stepped into the inner court when she doesn't have an invitation from the king, and to do so, the only penalty is death, unless she's given immunity, basically, by the king extending the scepter to her, and she gets to touch it, and then she will live. Verse 2, and when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even to half of my kingdom." So let's go to an interpretation of that, again, from a movie, and sort of imagine the tension in her and what's going on at this particular moment. And to me, one of the things I think that does it well is there's a movie that came out. This one is 2006 version of a film. It has a pretty powerful cast in it. Peter O'Toole, Omar Sharif, other folks that are included in this particular one. And this is the poster that related to it, and the image here that they're trying to convey. I know it's a little bit grainy, how they've intentionally made it a grainy shot for the poster, but in this particular area, Esther is pushing open with her hands. She's got her head bowed down, and she's pushing open two doors. There's the two handles there, if I zoomed in and looked at them, that are the entrance, if you will, to the inner court. And so she's pushing them over. I know you can't see it very clearly, but there in the back, there is a large winged lion where the king is going to be, and she's going to have to walk a long ways all the way up this particular entrance through maybe 100 people that are gathered on either side, total of 100 perhaps. I just, sort of look like that many. Walk past them and walk all the way up to where she can speak to the king. And so this is the moment right here where she doesn't know what's going to happen and the tension that's there. So if you can imagine, if you will, what happens when those doors open and everyone turns around and realizes that there's something afoot because she's just interrupted the business of the court, and all of a sudden she has stepped in, and she starts presumably walking slowly down this long aisle. And I would think that this would have to be a very long walk for her, one step at a time, waiting to see how this was going to turn out. So this next picture, it's also from the film. It's taken from above, and you can see the king at the bottom right. You can see that winged lion over top of his throne, and you can see where she's walked all the way in past all of these people, one step at a time, coming all the way in. And she stops, and she chooses to pause at the bottom of the steps, and she bows her head, and she waits. If you can imagine at this moment, I think you could probably hear a pin drop as to what exactly is going to happen next. The way they chose to portray it was then with the king standing up out of his throne. And I think that I picked this series of images because I liked the look on his face. It was, something's wrong. What would cause her to do this? And then this is very different than a lot of the other ones where it's just like this moment is over in an instant. And it's just like, oh yeah, sure. And at this moment, I don't know that he knows what he's going to say, and I don't know that she knows what she's going to say. On the one hand, it's his queen. Of course he's going to forgive her this. Of course. Why would he not? On the other hand, it's a very public setting, and she has just broken one of the rules, a core rule of the court. Y'all follow the importance of this? And so to extend this to her is to perhaps lower his own authority a bit. It depends upon how he says and what he says about it and how exactly it comes together. But I think the question that I see on his face is, what is up? Why would she do this? What is so important that would cause her to do this? And so there's a look here, and he then summons her to come up, and she walks up the stairs. And you've heard the story now more than once today, so you recognize what's going to happen next is that he will extend the scepter to her, and then things will be okay. But the courage that she shows in being able to take that first step, I think, is really important. Up until now, it's been this great idea. Well, we have this problem. What's the problem? The Jews are about to be killed. Wait, Esther is a Jew. She's queen. She can save us. It's a great idea. At the same time, that great idea carries risk. And the risk, of course, is what could happen to her, or could it even backfire for that matter? How would this occur, and how would it come together? What would happen? As we see Esther kind of showing this courage, one of the things that's very clear is she's relying upon her strength in God. We see her in the previous chapters that she has gone through and said, well, okay, I will fast, I will pray for 3 days. You gather everyone, every single Jew in the city of Susa. Mordecai, go and gather them all, and everybody pray and fast for me for 3 days. And at the end of that, I will go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. Well, as it turns out, of course, Esther does not perish. And he's waiting to see what exactly would be this phenomenal reason, this important request to be able to well, what was worth risking her life about. And so Esther says, if it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king. In the VeggieTales version, she says, want to come to a pizza party? And the king's like, that's it? So why, just kind of put your hands over on the keyboard for a second. Why wouldn't she right here, right now, just lay out her entire case for why the Jews should be saved? Why wouldn't she do that? She's got him right here. He just said up to half the kingdom will be yours. Right there, right now. So put your hands over the keyboard for me, and I would love. Have you thought about this? Why would she do it this way? An easy answer is God said so, and maybe he did. But there you go. All right. Okay. Amy says letting him stew on it for the night. Okay. It's, of course, the feast is going to be this day, but let him stew on it for a while. I think it's there. It's a public forum, right? And so, Paul, you're suggesting that she will get a better hearing if she's in a private setting. That if she can get the king over in private, that she's more likely to get him to consider it, because he's going to have to reverse one of his previous signed edicts, right? Eileen says, half the kingdom might only save half the Jews. That's a great one. Okay. Amy agrees that she wanted it to be private. So we don't know exactly, but I think it's fascinating to think through. Can you agree with me that she put some thought into how exactly this should go together? I think that's obvious, right? That she has thought through, okay, not to be sarcastic, but if he says I'm dead, there's really I don't have to decide what to say, right? There's nothing left for me to do. But what if he extends his scepter to me and I get to speak? What words would I speak? Okay. And of course, the first thing here is just breathe. Don't pass out. Don't faint. Just breathe. Right? Don't blow it. All right. So then the king said, bring Haman quickly so we may do as Esther has asked. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther answered, my wish and my request is that you save all the Jews. Right? Isn't that what she said? Surely. I mean, now it's in a private setting. Now we've had time to stew about it. Right? Now, surely, right? That's exactly what she said. Right? No. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, And if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. Okay, so now think about it. So if the goal was to get the king in private, right? Well, I mean, she didn't have to ask Haman to come along. She could have. Fascinating that she chose to do it. I mean, if you think about that, if she wanted to just sway the king, wouldn't it be best just to have her and the king? Right? Sort of interesting, right? Eileen says also gives Haman enough rope, so to speak, which is interesting. It's just an interesting allusion to what's about to happen, Eileen. Nice way to say it. So it's interesting. I don't have the answers for you as to why the second feast. The first one almost makes sense to me. The second one, I don't know. Maybe she, not to be sarcastic, maybe she never expected to get this far. I mean, maybe she never, that was possible. Perhaps it was a matter of this, that she's trying to build the tension and let him stew, as Amy had said earlier. Maybe it's a combination of various types of things. But I find it interesting that she spent a lot of time thinking this through and how exactly she was going to ask and frame the question. And I offered this up that it's interesting for me because of the fact that there are spots in the gospel where Jesus sort of tells us to do the opposite. Don't worry about what your words will be when you testify, for the Holy Spirit will speak for you. Does it sound familiar to anybody? Right? Now, this is not the exact same situation, I will certainly grant you, but she certainly has put a lot of thought into it. So there's balance in these things, and I think it's interesting as we see that, what happens here. I'm reminded of Nehemiah. So when Nehemiah goes before the king, and then he looks sad, and the king says, "You're the cupbearer to the king. You're sad. What's the problem?" And Nehemiah pauses and shoots a quick prayer to heaven. Oh Lord, please let me find favor. And although it's possible that Nehemiah has rehearsed multiple times over what it is he's going to say, he still prays before he goes and he speaks. Even if it's just a super quick prayer, he says at least something that's there. So, continuing on. And Haman went out that day, joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, where he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. Okay? Eileen says Haman can't see the trap that's being laid for him. That I would agree with you on. I don't think he can. Verse 11, and Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, and all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. And that's kind of an interesting statement here that Haman, in his desire to prove his own worth, is going to talk about all these great things that are there, and yet he finds an emptiness here. He finds an emptiness in that he doesn't have complete control over those that are around him. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all of this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So, what happens? Well, wife steps in. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. This, of course, won't work well for him, as for those of you that know the end of the story. So I have just a couple of quick takeaways here. Number one is a phrase, somebody on Facebook, I can't remember, I think it might have been Sherry's sister Lisa, put out there a question about is there words that you often say. And I think this one applies here. Number one, eventually every good idea turns into hard work. Now, normally I mean that the hard work means lots of work. And in Esther's case, there's not lots of work, but there is a very significant, difficult task. This good idea, as I said earlier, oh my gosh, we have a problem. And the problem is the Jews are going to be killed. But wait, Esther can save us. And Esther says, but the law says that whoever goes before the king unbidden will die. And I have not been called before the king these 30 days. So she's saying, yeah, that's a really good theory, but there's a problem with it. Of course, as you might recall, Mordecai says back to her, well, you're going to die anyway. And perhaps it was for such a time as this that the kingdom, meaning the becoming queen, came to you. Number 2 is that hard work starts with a single step in the right direction. I think many of us recognize that we have to change things. There are things in my life I know I need to do better on, and there's probably things in your life as well. Things that you could say, I really, really need to change this. This thing is really hurting me. Maybe this thing is killing me. This thing is hurting my relationship with God. This thing is making me not be who I'm supposed to be. I really, really need to do this. And whatever it's worth, we often try things on New Year's resolutions and other things to try and do better this year on fill in the blank, whatever it might be, and so forth. Well, guess what? It's March 1st. It's 2 years in. How'd those New Year's resolutions turn out for you? Probably not so good. Maybe some of them did. Maybe there was something dramatic that you changed in your life. And so I commend you at that. But I would submit for some of the things, we never even started the resolution. We never even did anything significant with it. And maybe it's beyond resolution. Perhaps it's more down something more spiritual. It's down in our gut that really just gnaws at us, and we need to do something about it. Well, like Esther, where Esther is at the doors, and Esther reaches up with both her hands and shoves the doors open and takes one step in. At that point, she's committed. It's long and painful as she walks up that passageway up to the up to the throne of the king. And those are probably some of the longest, slowest steps she ever had to take. But the steps started with her laying her hands on the doors, knowing that this is through the doorway I have to step through, and there's something for me on the other side. What's that doorway for you? What is the thing that you need to be brave about? And no offense, no more prayer, no more fasting, no more talking, no more any of those things is going to do anything until somebody takes an action. What is that for you? I suspect there probably is something in your life at this point that you know I'm speaking about. I don't know what it is, but you know, and the Holy Spirit knows. Well, what is that thing that you need to be brave about? Put your hands on the doors, shove them open, and take that first step to walk that long walk that you know you need to take. I would ask that God would give you courage today for that. When we talk about the Stepping Stones Project, that's really the essence of what exactly it is we're all talking about. That there are spiritual steps we need to take, and as you step to that next stone in the river, as you're taking it, there are those of us there who are going to applaud you as you go and take that next step. And if you fall down, we will do our very best to help reach into the water and help pick you up. And believe me, there's none of us on this particular set of rocks that hasn't fallen into that water at least once, and that certainly includes me. Let's go ahead and get to the question of the week. It's pretty simple and straightforward overall, and that is, where does God want me to take action this week? The story of Esther is about this dramatic series of events. It's about a threat to the Jewish people, the people of God. In the same way, it's about a threat to you. Not that you necessarily are in that time with those types of things going on, but there are challenges in your life even now. And there are things that you do need to go beyond praying and talking about it. And there are times when you do, in fact, need to take action. Now, a lot of times I'm one that says we'll think about it and pray about it and talk about it beforehand. But I will recognize there is a spot where, in fact, action is absolutely needed. And this is a situation where Esther proved this is the time and the place for a single hard step. So where does God want me to take action this week? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord Heavenly Father, I thank you for all that you have done for us. I thank you that you calm our hearts and you give us time and patience. I thank you that you give us the ability to be quiet with you. But God, there are times when you call us to action as well. You didn't call David to go out and have a chat with Goliath. There was only one way that was going to end, with one of them dead. And somebody had to stand up and do something. There are other confrontations I can think of, occurrence with some of your prophets before Baal, for example, or others that are there, where, oh God, you call us to take an action. Lord, if we are at one of those places this week, if there is something that we need to do, then guide us, give us good wisdom, but then give us the courage to take a step. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.